Hello, my name is Matthew Konieczny. I'm the editor-in-chief of Your Active, and it's my pleasure today to welcome a MEP from the EPP, that's a lot of acronyms, but from the European People's Party, from the Partido Popular in Spain, Antonio Lopez Isturiz White. That's quite a mouthful. Thank you very much for being here. I say that as somebody with a very complicated surname, but I like your name.
We love that, the Spaniards.
Exactly, but there's a lot of history in your name, which is interesting. Most Spaniards do not have the name White. Can we start by telling us how that came about?
Yeah, my mother's American, from Kansas City, Missouri. And they moved to Spain in the 60s when Spain was open to the rest of the world during the Franco's dictatorship. My family was in the army. My grandfather was a general in the American U.S. Army. And they went to live to Spain and didn't move from there.
Wow,
so,
the rest is history. But as someone who's
well,
also...
I have to tell you about
Yep.
the European People's Party. I was thinking about it. I have an anecdote,
Yeah.
I mean, it's very hard for me to explain the United States about the European People's Party, not to be confounded with any communist, People's Party, like the one in China or Russia.
Right.
For the American mentality, People's Party means very different.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, as somebody who's also half American, I know that the United States isn't always the most popular country in much of Europe. How are attitudes now?
Unfortunately, yeah, that's the truth. Only, by the way, only when there are Democrat presidents on board.
Right.
That's when they become popular. I don't care. I think that the transatlantic relation economically is the greatest on this planet, the transatlantic economical relation. Politically, I don't care who's president. I mean, I have had very good relations with Clinton's administration, Bush, Obama not so. They were more focused in Asia. Now Trump, very difficult to have some kind of relation, being European. And Biden administration, yeah, we had some good relation, but not enough to construct and to overcome what is coming now.
But your current government, which your party is obviously not a member of,
In Spain.
is led by PSOE, by the Socialist Party. They've taken a particularly, I would say, aggressive stance towards the transatlantic relationship in many respects, and particularly regarding NATO. Some people might remember the picture from the last NATO summit where Pedro Sanchez, the Prime Minister of Spain, was really almost standing outside the group, and Spain sort of pushing back on more military spending, which is obviously a big demand of the United States at the moment.
Socialist Party in Spain has had a curious evolution from a transatlantic, very, European standards, international politics has changed, unfortunately. In the times of Felipe González, the first socialist prime minister of my country, by the way, that government recognized for the very first time, Spain recognized Israel as a state. It was through a socialist government.
That was in 1986, I believe.
Yeah, that's it. But they evolutionated into a more political motivated international policy since the times of Zapatero. Taking sides, like, with leftist governments in Latin America, with the Grupo de Puebla, the Venezuela regime, Cuba, very soft policies there, which, and then also in the Middle East. And Sanchez is, let's say, the emblem of this. He has gone, I think, too far. There are still question marks. Why did Spain, which had, for example, the question coming to the Sahara with Morocco, Spain, which was Sahara was a former colony of Spain, had that responsibility through the United Nations. And Spain always respected that, that the United Nations should give a solution to the question of the Western Sahara. And then suddenly, one day to the other, the socialists, which were always supporting the Sahrawis, in their cause also of independence or whatever you want to call it. Suddenly, from one day to the other, they sold the Sahrawis to the Moroccan, government, and and renounced from any claims and so on. I mean, there are shifts there in the policy that are very hard to understand. In the Socialist Party in Spain that has. Some of us, we think, of course, that has, brought back the protagonism that Spain, through the government of González and then also Partido Popular with José María Aznar and others, had a very good transatlantic also relation. No? Unfortunately, I think this is now something that is not there.
As somebody who looks a lot at foreign policy, you obviously recognize many of the contradictions in Spanish foreign policy at the moment, and you cited one with the Western Sahara, which Morocco has obviously been eyeing for a very long time, and Moroccan relations with Spain are also important, but this kind of realpolitik, if we want to call it that Sanchez is showing there, is quite a contrast to his approach to the situation in Gaza, in Israel, where he has really been on the forefront to accuse Israel of genocide, obviously to push other countries to also recognize.
As we speak today, his brother is indicted by tribunals in Spain. Yep. His wife is now called to tribunals for corruption cases. They are not the only ones. We believe that these two, trying to put some shadow over, what's going on with the corruption in Spain, with this actual government.
So you think this is a diversionary tactic?
I would cover up. I would like to use another word, but right. To try to distract public opinion from what's going on in the reality that the government is collapsing. By the way, with right. Many parties. That do not support the dependence of this government from one single Catalonian party, independence party, Mr. Puigdemont. And, I think that this whole thing has been Sanchez trying to distract Spanish public opinion from this reality, I don't think that he will be successful. Corruption cases are tried by independent, of course, tribunals in my country. Right. And, I think that this will go in another way for him.
So the case involving his brother, for people who don't know, there's a suspicion that he received a job as an orchestra director in a regional orchestra.
During the investigations, they tried to, they asked him, where is your office? That he had right. been paid for an office with public money, right. and he didn't find it.
Right. So it looks like it might have been a fake job for a very
fake
very
office,
nice salary.
Fake job, right. You name it.
Right. And there's similar suspicions surrounding his wife, who's
unfortunately. I mean, I'm telling you, that's not good. I don't like this kind of things, because right. the ones that we work for international image to always, have the best relations of your country. Either you are in government or in opposition. When you work in the international field, is always to, transmit the best image of your country. These kind of things do not help.
Although some people would say, well, this is just how Spanish politics work. The PP has also been mired in many scandals over the years, most recently the Rajoy government and so forth. I mean, is this
And there was a motion against him, right. And then came the socialist government.
But is this part of the Spanish political culture?
One thing I'm a little bit tired of is the double standards. Let's say there was not even an induction from the call from the judges. Let's say that there was only a headline from El País against the wife of Rajoy or Aznar. Only a headline. We will have like a national revolution. The wife of the actual prime minister is being called for tribunals, indicted. Also the brother, and nothing happens. And the media, it's very soft on this. Why? That's something that not only in Spain, many places is going. And this, I think, has also provoked the rise of other, let's say, more extreme options. I will not fall into that. I am a member of the European People's Party, of Partido Popular, center-right, And I'm always, my belief has always that we have to work, for the image of our country, international politics, constructively. And, these double standards, I believe, have created, something to our right that we could have avoided.
You're referring to Vox, obviously, which is...
Whatever, there are many parties right now rising in Europe, like it or not, that is the reality. And, in my case, I will work always, to bring people back, because people are not guilty. People are looking for answers in a very uncertain moment. Fears are now in our societies, spread again about the future. Is there going to be any jobs for my sons or my grandsons? Is there going to be, a future? This geostrategical situation, wars coming up, let's say the the new Cold War between China and the United States with these tectonic plates, like in the past Vietnam, Korea, Cuba, now it's Ukraine, Middle East. What could be next? I don't know. This creates fear in our societies, and people tend in this kind of times to look for more, let's say, populist, We have to bring back these people. We have to give them assurances. Unfortunately, right now in Europe and in the world, I don't see the leadership that I saw in the past. For example, in the construction of Europe.
Well, if you look, though, at the strategy that Sanchez appears to be following with all of these scandals involving his family and also some of his former senior advisors, et cetera, it's very focused on the situation in Gaza, as we discussed. And it appears to be working to a degree. So I guess my question is, why is this such a powerful issue in Spain? Because as you said, people are worried about the future. Spain has had a difficult, last 15 years, let's say. Recently things have improved, but obviously economically, the country has a lot of pressure points. And yet, there is this obsession almost, I would call it.
Like everywhere.
Over what's going on.
You can find that in Brussels. We had a resolution about Gaza last week, and we could see the tensions between the extremes. I was one of the negotiators, and I can tell you, my main aim was that this resolution will not reach headlines. And we were successful. Why? Because there were, it was a resolution finally approved by the majority of the parliament, because which were the only ones that were not happy, the extremes, extreme left and extreme right. I think that was mission accomplished. We don't need now, I'm sorry to tell you, we don't need headlines. These are polarizing, nowadays, I'm telling you, they are polarizing people. Unfortunately, for whatever reasons we can be here, hours talking about this. Right. But, that is what's happening. My mission as a center-right politician is, not to bring headlines, but to bring solutions, balanced resolutions about Gaza. That was the case last week, that go unnoticed, but at least bring some, the right approach from Europe, recognizing both things: the attacks on the 7th of October, the influence of Iran, that I guess we will speak about, and then also the humanitarian situation on the ground. What's going on? That was it. That is what Europe has to do.
But you don't think that there's anything specific in Spain or in its history? Some people, would point to Spain's history of Islam, etc., and various other points in its history that might indicate why there's a particular focus on this conflict.
I would not argue that, because you could find
because people aren't demonstrating about Ukraine.
You could find a very divisive thing there with the Spanish society. Also, you have to understand that it was not also the influence of Islam, but also 800 of years fighting against Islam, which also had a brand on the Spanish mentality.
Of course.
But to tell you, I have to recognize the diplomacy that Spain during many years had through its diplomats, and also our royal house, which was very balanced and very, I think it was the right, correct approach to the Arab, countries. And, politically and diplomatically, there was a very good, Spain was not only the bridge between the European Union and Latin America, but also through our royal family and our, some governments, it was also with many Arab countries,
Right.
with Europe. And that was, I'm telling you, unfortunately in the past, Spain was this bridge and was exercising a very good diplomatic effort, also for the European Union. I have to tell you, unfortunately, because of the events we have talked about, this is not the case today.
You mentioned Iran, and one of the, I think, big stories of the recent past that has gotten absolutely no attention, no headlines, to use your phrasing, is the snapback of the sanctions against Iran, which comes as a result of.
Do you know why there are
Iran
not
shutting out the
headlines?
IAEA.
May I tell you?
Yes,
from the
please.
inside,
Yeah.
in the European voting of the resolutions, because we all agree. In the Iran resolutions, you have seen from the extreme right, to the extreme left, a whole consensus from all political groups. There are two things in the parliament right now that I could tell you that they have a single position from all European Parliament. It's Nicaragua from one side, and the other is Iran.
Right.
For many reasons, because Nicaragua is more a family dictatorship, Ortega and his wife and so on, and it's not attractive, not even for the left,
Right.
because Venezuela and Cuba, yes, but not Nicaragua. And Iran, also, it's condemned from the extreme right to the extreme left. And there is a big consensus about that. That's why, unfortunately, I believe that there are no headlines.
But the fact that there are no headlines is also an indication that there's no real debate
Claro.
about what danger is it.
No, we all agree.
posed. Yeah.
We all agree through these resolutions denouncing that this theological regime of the Ayatollahs in Iran is bringing to us in Europe. We had a former vice president of the European Parliament who was shot in the streets of Madrid, Alejo Vidal Quadras, openly, and he has not been the only one.
Right.
There was many, there was this guy who was tried in the Netherlands and in Belgium. He tried to blow up a whole convention of the Iranian opposition with many European and American politicians, active politicians on board.
Well, this is an interesting case, and because you say everybody agrees, but I would argue that that's a case where the Belgians, in particular, made a huge error by changing their constitution so that they could trade this person, this terrorist who was caught.
But they were victims of the hostage diplomacy by Iran.
Yes, but this was somebody who. What happened was that a Belgian member of an NGO was in Iran working voluntarily. Nobody forced him to go there. He decided to go there at a time when they were taking a lot of hostages. He ends up being accused of espionage and thrown into Evin prison, which
That's
is
the
notorious.
regime.
And then they use this person as
Bargain chip.
basically a bargaining chip. And originally the Belgians didn't want to fall into this trap, but over time they did. They agreed to change their constitution to allow them to exchange the terrorists who tried to blow up this convention for their citizen, which is good for him. But it doesn't really suggest that there's a strong will to stand up to Iran. Now, the snapback is a different issue, but that doesn't cost anybody anything. And I guess what I'm wondering
I come from a different culture. I was assistant to the Prime Minister, José María Aznar, at times where Partido Popular was in government, and the slogan was, like many other European governments, no negotiations with terrorists. But okay, you have to respect also different policies, in the European Union. As you know, still the governments are the owners of this, and their sovereign decisions, from the other side, you also have to respect.
But how confident are you, though, given this history, also of your previous governments? Josep Borrell, I spoke to him some years ago when he was Spanish foreign minister after President Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal, and asked him at the time, well, isn't he worried about what Iran says it will do by destroying Israel, etc., aren't those reasons to take a stronger stance against Iran? And he basically said, well, that's not new. They've always wanted to do that. And so he seemed to
But Trump was
not take
right.
these threats
It's
seriously.
one of these, maybe one could argue, few times where Trump was right. There has not been any proof that Iran has any intention not to renounce, to build up its nuclear power, and to have military-grade uranium as soon as possible.
But given the fact that, unlike the United States, Europe is directly exposed because Iran has an arsenal of ballistic missiles that it can reach Europe with, and that is something that I haven't heard anybody really. I mean, you talked about it recently in the Parliament.
Well, usually I do
it's
it
not something that a lot of
whenever
people
I
discuss.
finish my statements in the European Parliament. If someone follows, I don't know. I could tell you I always end saying, if Israel fails, Europe is next. Okay? Once the obsession of the Iranian regime, which is in the Iranian constitution, the liquidation of Israel, once this is accomplished by the Iranians, next target is Europe. In their, through their proxies, all this, this diplomacy of Iran, which has always been done through Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, the militias in Syria, in Iraq. What is the next target? I mean, you don't have to be, an international expert to understand who's next in this. Right.
Right. But what do you think is next in terms of EU policy towards Iran? I mean, do you think that the sanctions snapback will work in forcing Iran to
as they are
the,
now? No,
the
they have to
IAEA
be
back in?
enlarged. They have to be, they have to be stronger, our sanctions against the regime. That's what they feel hard. As well with other regimes in the world, that we are not so very strong also, like Venezuela. But why I mention Venezuela, because there is a connection. People should know that there are direct flights now going
Between
also
Iran
through Europe,
Yeah.
From Tehran to Caracas. These people are working together and they're very well coordinated, although they don't have anything in common. They have a common goal, our democracies.
Right. I mean, you mentioned sanctions, and there already are a lot of sanctions, obviously,
Yes.
that have been imposed. But one of the problems, I think, in recent years with Iran, but also with Russia certainly, is that these sanctions aren't properly enforced. So it's not so much about imposing sanctions, but it's about enforcing the sanctions that are already there. And if you look at, for example, the money flows from Iran through UAE and other Gulf states using European banks, for example.
Excuse me, you don't have to use the UAE. You know that in Spain, talking about what happened. Sorry, I'm not here today to speak about Spanish politics, but telling you there is a perfect example. Vice President of the Venezuelan government landed, who she is forbidden to touch European soil, Delcy Rodriguez, landed in Barajas Airport, Madrid. She was received by a minister of the Spanish government, 2 a.m., with bags full of gold that they were going, we don't know where.
Right.
In a stopover in Spain. This was denounced, this was proved, nothing has been done. Claro, it's very hard to enforce this, true.
But where do we go to get this kind of enforcement? I mean, who needs to be called in order for these?
I think these are the kind of measures that the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and the governments, have to. If we really want to be not only with Iran but with Russia and others, if we have to be effective, this whole system has to be reviewed, because claro, we all know it's not only the sanctions. For example, something that Europe is champion: humanitarian aid. In the world, it's the European countries and the European institutions are the largest donors of humanitarian aid throughout the globe. But we always have the sensation, does the money from the Europeans arrive to the right people that are suffering? Or is this, taken by intermediaries?
Yeah.
We don't have boots on the ground. That's a problem also. I'm not talking about a European army, but something to make effective that the money and the good solidarity and help from the European peoples and societies, arrive to the right people.
But in terms of the
And that's also, sorry to say,
Yeah.
about the sanctions.
Right.
We need also, as I said, boots on the ground, whatever you want to call it. We need a network, of people, experts, also that could make sure that these sanctions are really implemented, not only outside of the European Union, but unfortunately also inside, as this Spanish case was an example.
Right. I mean, that's an example. There are plenty of examples also from Germany.
Yes.
In particular,
There
I
are.
think France dealing with Iran in various ways.
Yes.
They have deep economic history, let's say, with Iran. And
Brussels
eager to
says one
recharge.
thing and then capitals do another. This is, something that we all know. But I'm telling you, in this new context that we are living, I believe that capitals throughout Europe have to be a little bit more serious in the implementations of sanctions that they have already approved through the Council, but later on they do not accomplish individually, many times. That's true.
I mean, what effect do you think the energy discussion in Europe is having on Middle East policy and all of these sort of considerations?
Like everything else, Europe is an island. On energetical, ways, we need energy. We are one of the largest consumers in the world, but we don't have our sources. We have very scarce, very few sources, energetical sources. We depend from outside. And, this affects also, our foreign policy. Unfortunately, I mean, there has to be ways, to overcome this. By just one example, we are sanctioning Russia and so on, blah, blah, blah. But liquid gas from Russia is still, flowing to European, ports.
Right.
And also countries.
Well, and oil, obviously, as well,
Yes.
through the shadow fleet. And that's what I'm getting at. There's a tendency to impose these sanctions and then look the other way because there's a fear that if these sanctions are really enforced, that the price of oil and gas would go up quite considerably. And that's also true of Iran, which sells a lot of oil, not so much to Europe,
one
but
of the
to
largest,
China.
producers in the world.
Right.
And largest reserves, as far as I know. I think that the largest reserves are in, unfortunately, Venezuela and Iran.
Well, that's what they have in common.
Yes.
But how do you see this playing out in the kind of medium term? I mean, do you think that this new sanctions push will work in forcing Iran back to the table, forcing them
I think
to
with the actual
accept IAEA?
geostrategical situation that surrounds Europe, I think that governments are becoming aware that finally we have to be more serious about it and the implementation of these sanctions, I hope. And, and I think that finally, like everything else, this European Union, like Monet said, a visionary, that he should have been had the Nobel Prize. This European construction is a miracle. I mean, that we are all sitting together, and implementing the measures that we are doing, it's already a miracle. Seeing our history throughout centuries, no? I mean, we have to, make this case of the sanctions clear as an emblem, a symbol of the role that Europe wants to play in the world, and the defense of our beliefs, our values and principles that took us centuries, millions of killed in wars, religious wars, you name it, now we are approaching with a different stand. I think is the right one. To defend, our democracies and our liberties that are right now under threat. Absolutely, from dictatorships, also authoritarian regimes, they call others, like Turkey, whatever, we are under threat. And I think that we live in our little bubble here in Europe. Imperfect, it's not perfect, but, it's an island right now of democracy and liberty, and sometimes I have the feeling that even ourselves, we are not aware of what's going around. And I remember the war in Bosnia, in the Balkans, in the 90s. That war was right next to our doors. No one cared in Europe.
Right.
In public opinion, societies did not have. The first invasion of Ukraine by the Russians was also not a topic for Europeans. It was, at the end, the invasion of Ukraine that finally woke up and woke up the European societies before the prime ministers. That you remember,
Right.
that long table between Putin and Macron.
Yeah.
The European societies were faster in their reaction against this, this invasion, and that really European politicians, I have to admit.
But do you think that all of this talk now about common defense initiatives, more money for joint procurement, etc. We had a big event last night with Commissioner Kubelius, who was
good friend,
kind of
serious person,
beating the drum for that. Obviously, a serious person who really wants to push this forward. We had more incidents this week with the drones appearing in Copenhagen and Oslo. But do you think that most of your colleagues in the Parliament and everywhere in the sort of EU institutions, are they committed for the long term on this, or are they just sort of paying lip service to spending more money on defense, and as soon as there's a sign that Putin's willing to pull back or have a peace deal of some sort, that the pressure will lift and everybody will go back to
every action by Putin, every provocation like the drones and so on is uniting us more. So.
And you think people are committed to
that's the reality.
To spend money.
And I have to tell you, 10 years ago, I have been many years member of the subcommittee on defense in the European Parliament, which is now a full committee, by the way. And I remember we were like 4 or 5 persons talking about defense, and we were a little bit the crazy ones that were talking about defense and European defense. Now it's everybody. Everybody wants to join the Defense Committee in the European Parliament. Yeah. Now it's the place to be.
Right.
So something is moving. I think that everybody is aware. It was not about the 2% by Trump. It already came from Obama. Obama gave warning signs that the American policy was changing, and and I think that Trump only took that and implemented, by the way, his way, and and I think it's good for us. It's a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call. We've been 80 years, covered by the American umbrella. It's time also for us, to have independence. I think that we depend once in others, the Americans also from the Europeans. It's just that we need also our margin of maneuver in this kind of affairs, and also our aims are not maybe the same as the Americans in many fields. Our priorities, as shown, for example, in the Ukrainian case, that finally Europe, is showing now that it's a top priority for us.
Spain is an interesting example, though, because your current government doesn't really support, pushing forward as forcefully in terms of spending more on defense as many are demanding. What would change if your party were to come to power again?
Just accomplishing the mandatory obligations of a normal Western democratic country, to pay NATO and our military obligations with everybody. Why? Because it's at the end, I would say, even from a pragmatical point of view, it's cheaper to maintain NATO than building your own, at the end, your own military capacities. If I always say in Spanish, public activities and so on, you don't pay NATO, finally you will have military conscriptions in Spain, and you have to be loyal. You have to be loyal to your associates, like they are with you. The Spanish, we are calling the attention. Some reasonable Spanish politicians, we are using our time in Brussels also to warn. Everybody's focused in Ukraine, but also we are warning about what's going on in the south, the Sahel, with the Russian and Chinese very active in Africa.
Right.
The French were kicked out. I don't know. There is good news. There is some news there. The French were kicked out of Africa, and now it's in the hands of the Chinese and the Russians. And what are the Europeans doing? This is something that we have to work on. And I belong to that breed of politicians that we are denouncing this every day. We need to have, this kind of approach.
But denouncing it clearly isn't enough. And as you said, the French have...
I'm very patient European politician. I know how things go. I'm not in a populist party. I don't have the solution tomorrow morning. I know that this takes time. The building of a European defense, after 80 years of dependence, from the Americans and so on, it will take time. This is not going to happen tomorrow morning. I know,
But do we have time to...
Yes, we have time. We have time. Europeans, we might be slow, and that is a very correct, always critic, from inside and outside, but we are very secure. Once it's built, once you have the consensus, no one can break it. It's very hard to reach that consensus. You need the Maltese as well as the Germans on board. Very same. But once you obtain it, that was my experience throughout 20 years as Secretary General of the EPP. When congresses were coming, resolutions in those congresses were a nightmare for me. I had to bring back, together 80 parties from all around Europe, from the EPP, from the center-right, Christian Democrats, liberals, conservatives, from also different parties in every country. And, it was a nightmare, but finally we always had a resolution. And that, at the end, no one could change that. So many people, so many interests, so many political approaches, were in that resolution, that at the end, no one could change it. Everybody was reflected. This is Europe about. Slow, but effective.
Slow but effective. On that optimistic note, I think we're going to draw a line under this conversation. Antonio Lopez, Isturiz, White, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you very much.
It was fascinating, and hope to see you again soon.
Me too. Thank you very much.